Imagine living in your house for 9 years without realizing that there is a 55-gallon barrel in the crawl space, which is holding a perfectly preserved, mummified body. Not only that, but the body had been buried underneath that same house for 30 years without anyone ever knowing. And it was tied back to a really prominent and wealthy businessman in another state. This is the disturbing case of Raina Murakeen, a pregnant woman whose murder remained unsolved for 30 years until this barrel was found. So in September of 1999, Ronald Cohen sold his house at 67 Forest Drive in Jericho, New York. He had lived in it for 9 years and he sold it for $455,000. As he was getting ready to vacate the property, he went to the crawl space of his home beneath the bottom floor to triple check that nothing was left behind. There he found a 55-gallon barrel that sat untouched for the entire 9 years that he lived inside this home. Not even knowing it was there that entire time, he became curious as to what was inside. And when he finally pried the lid off, he discovered a disturbing scene. Upon opening, the barrel smelled incredibly bad and it was stuffed with plastic pellets. But sticking out of the pellets was a human hand. Needless to say, Ronald quickly called the police, who found that there was an entire mummified body inside this barrel. The body was completely intact because it was airtight, but that's not all they found. Investigators found that the body belonged to a pregnant Hispanic woman who was in her late 20s at the time of death. She was around 5 feet tall and had unusual dental work done that was not from the United States. The fetus was a boy who was about 17 inches long, meaning this was a near full-term pregnancy when this woman died. The autopsy determined that the woman died from blunt force trauma to the head. Along with the woman's body in the barrel, police also found polystyrene pellets, 2 rings, which one of them was inscribed with the initials MHR, a locket also inscribed with the phrase, quote, "To Patrice, love Uncle Phil." End quote. Some green dye, a plastic artificial plant stem, which is an important detail to remember for later, a handwritten note likely from this woman that said, quote, "Don't be mad, I told the truth." End quote. And an old and decaying address book. This was a long shot because of how old and decayed the book was, but police used infrared light to examine each page, and shockingly, some of the writing was still legible. One thing that was clear as day was a social security number that belonged to a 27-year-old woman named Raina Murakeen. Raina came to the US from El Salvador in 1966. She then went to fashion school, worked as a nanny, and then ultimately got a job at the Melrose Plastics factory. Police then officially confirmed that the body found in the barrel did in fact belong to Raina, and she died in 1969. And since she was last known to work at Melrose Plastics factory, investigators thought this would be a good place to start. After examining the barrel, there were specific markings on it that showed that it was last shipped to, you guessed it, Melrose Plastics. This was a Manhattan-based artificial flower company that was partly owned by a man named Howard B. Elkins. After digging into who Howard was, investigators learned that he actually previously owned the Jericho house where Raina's remains were found. Neighbors surrounding the home all vaguely remembered who Howard was and the flower company that he owned, but nothing more than that. But interestingly enough, after Raina's body was found, someone anonymously called the police and told them that Howard had previously had an affair with a Hispanic woman who used to work at his factory. So again, it seemed like the investigators were on the right track in solving this mystery. Howard sold Melrose Plastics in 1972 and had long since moved with his wife and 3 children to Florida. Howard lived a very social life. He was a really wealthy and prominent businessman, but little did anyone know, he was secretly living a double life. Police found a phone number in Raina's address book and decided to give it a call. It belonged to one of Raina's old friends named Kathy, and literally after the first ring, she picked up, which is extremely lucky because that meant Kathy had the same phone number for 30 plus years. What Kathy told police though is shocking. She said that all those years ago in 1969, Raina had been having an affair with her boss, Howard. She ended up getting pregnant with his child and told Kathy this. Raina was so excited and told her that Howard was married with 3 kids already, but he assured her that he was going to leave his wife to be with her. Raina was worried though that he wouldn't keep his promise, so not long before she disappeared in 1969, she called Howard's wife and told her that she was pregnant. I guess Howard became enraged with her and threatened to kill her, and Raina became scared of him. Not long after this, Raina disappeared. The only person that really knew Raina in the US was Kathy, and after a little while of not hearing from her, Kathy went to Raina's apartment in New Jersey to check on her. But not only was Raina nowhere to be found, but the entire apartment was completely empty. Someone had cleared it out. After this, no one ever heard from Raina ever again, and sadly, police never really investigated her disappearance. What's super weird to me is that before she disappeared, Raina went to Melrose Plastics with a toddler, who I guess happened to be hers. No one knows who the dad was or what happened to the little boy after this, but all the employees at the factory joked around and said that the boy's father was Howard. So after learning all of this information, police tracked Howard down in this luxury retirement community in Florida. Howard did not expect to see the police on the other side of his door and was literally shocked. Now 30 years later, Howard was pretty uncooperative. When told about Raina, he denied knowing anything about a barrel, but he did admit to having an affair. He just didn't remember what the woman looked like or what her name was. He refused to give a DNA sample to compare it to the fetus that was found inside Raina, but police pretty much told him that he did not have a choice, that they would be back later with a warrant and would get that blood sample one way or another. The very next day, which was September 10th, 1999, Howard went to Walmart, bought a shotgun, and then got inside of his neighbor's car that was parked in their garage and fatally shot himself, ending his own life. After he was found, DNA testing did confirm that he was the father of Raina's baby. Since we obviously never got any real answers from Howard before he killed himself, police assumed that he either went to Raina's apartment in 1969 or lured her to the factory and killed her by bludgeoning her over the head. It's suspected that he then took her body back to his home in Jericho and put her in the 55-gallon barrel, planning to dump it into the ocean off his boat. So he filled the barrel up with dye and plastic pellets to ensure that it would be heavy enough to sink, but it weighed about 350 pounds, so he really didn't think ahead. So now with it being too heavy to move, he just left the barrel in the crawl space of his home, where it sat untouched for 30 years. So finally, after 30 years, the disappearance and murder of Raina Murakin was officially put to rest. A reporter actually went to El Salvador after finding Raina's mom. She was now 95 years old, and when he told her the news of her daughter passing, she was devastated. She nearly collapsed and said that Raina had stopped writing home in 1969 without any explanation, and she always wondered what happened to her little girl. She said that deep down, she always knew that this was the fate that Raina likely suffered, because she would always have recurring nightmares of her being trapped in a barrel. And if you just take a second to think about that, that's so incredibly sad. And it just proves how much of a strong connection a parent has with their child. Raina's mom died not long after learning what happened to her. This is such a sad and frustrating case because Howard got to live out the rest of his life while Raina didn't. She was buried underneath a home while other families got to make so many memories right above her. It's also crazy that the house had been sold 3 separate times before anyone found the barrel and decided to open it up. And one big question I have is, did Howard's wife know that he killed Raina? I mean, all of his neighbors and his new life in Florida were all shocked. They said that he was super social, well-liked, and well-known, and that he was a lovely man, that there's no way that he would do such a thing. But he did, and his wife at least knew about part of it. She knew that he had an affair and that Raina was pregnant, so it makes me question if she knew about her disappearance or murder too. Maybe Howard told her that it was handled because he was a big liar and manipulator, or maybe she just didn't ask. Some think that since they were so wealthy and known to the community that it's possible she did know, but she just decided to look the other way so as not to ruin their image. Either way, the story is devastating. I just hope that Raina and her baby are together somewhere in a place far better than how she ever got treated here on Earth. And also, if you ever move into a house and find an old 55-gallon barrel, don't wait 9 years to open it. You never know what or who could be inside waiting to be found.